We go now over to Anonymous in Canada. Anonymous, why are you pro-choice?
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Thank you, Anonymous.
I am pro-choice because of the bodily rights argument, which basically says that no one has a right to someone else's body without their consent. And I'd really encourage your audience to read up on this argument. It's very simple, it's very intuitive, and I don't see how you get around it.
Okay. Well, Anonymous, I'm very familiar with bodily rights arguments. In Chapter 8 of my book, Persuasive Pro-Life, I address those arguments. In fact, I had a debate you and others can look up on YouTube with David Boonin, the leading defender of this kind of argument for abortion. We had a debate at Stanford about this very point. And I think the problem with this argument is that it's an argument by analogy, and the analogy breaks down. I would agree with you that if someone is dying of kidney failure, they don't have a right to my kidney. So I have the right to refuse to save their life. But abortion is not like donating a kidney. It's not refusing to save a sick person. Abortion is more like donating a kidney and then violently taking it back, killing the person in the process. With abortion, you cause someone to become dependent on your body, and then you kill them so that they're no longer dependent. So I might have the right to refuse to save someone's life by giving them an organ. I don't have the right to cause someone to become dependent on my body and then kill them by depriving them of what I've made them dependent upon. So do you see the difference there?
I don't agree. I don't think it's the same. Actually, I disagree with what you're saying. Everyone gets in their cars every day and drives around knowing that they could cause harm to someone else. If I happen to cause harm to someone else by getting in a car accident, I might even have caused the accident. I might even have died in the accident. It still doesn't give them a right to my body. It doesn't give them access to my body without my consent.
Right. Well, what I would respond to that by 2 points. Number one, there isn't the same connection, causal connection, between driving a car and someone being dependent on your body, such as needing your blood, for example. That driving a car is not, there is no direct causal connection to that. It's a series of events. They're not naturally ordered towards that, so there's no natural responsibility that arises from driving a car that you have to donate organs. And once again here, you wouldn't cause someone to be dependent on you. They would be dying from some other ailment, and once again, you're refusing to save them. But in pregnancy, when a man and woman engage in sexual intercourse, that is naturally ordered towards creating a child who needs the mother's body to survive. And so a natural responsibility to the child arises. I would agree with you, like my blood is meant for my body, my kidneys are meant to filter my blood. So it's extraordinary to expect them to be used for other people's bodies, but a woman's uterus and reproductive system is for the child. So it's not extraordinary to expect the child to be allowed to use the woman's body since she engaged in an activity that made the child who those organs are naturally for. To give you a parallel, let me give you an example. Suppose a woman gives birth to a child and she's in a cabin and she's snowed in. The only way she can feed the child is by breastfeeding. Does the child have a right to her body through breastfeeding?
I want to go back to what you said about natural order. Can we do that?
I'm fine going back to that, but I'm just curious, what's your answer in the breastfeeding case?
The child has no right to the woman's breast. The mother has many options.
Okay, well then I'll just describe that as a consistent yet chilling response. Okay, then what about and I think that for most people who would see the child, that if you chose to not breastfeed your baby and starved them, most people would see that as being murder and being wrong. And so if they do see that, then I think my objections to the bodily rights argument hold. But what was your concern about the natural order?
Okay, I wanted to go. Okay, all right. The mother's not. What I wanted to say is the mother's not obligated to breastfeed. She could provide formula. She could.
Let's say she can't. She in this case she is isolated and she can only breastfeed.
So she has no access to food?
No, let's say she's snowed in a rural area. Well, she has access to food, but a baby can't eat food; they'll die. They need either formula or milk.
This is a ridiculous hypothetical.
Why is it ridiculous? No, it's no more ridiculous than saying because you can create a baby in the womb and then kill that baby because they supposedly don't have a right to your body, even though you engaged in an act that made them and you have organs naturally designed to sustain them. So I don't think it's any more ridiculous at all. And I think the outflow of your argument has shown which is more or less sane. So something to think about. Definitely check out my book or listen to my debate with David Boonin to hear more on the bodily rights argument and my critique of it.
Thank you very much, Anonymous, for that call. We'll be right back with more. We'll talk with you. Trent is the author of Persuasive Pro-Life and many other books, and happy to take your call. And Trent, you show remarkable restraint sometimes. I mean, even when people talk about starving a baby, you plow ahead calmly and generously, I would say.
Well, I mean, what is interesting, my background is in philosophy. I'm completing a master's in philosophy now and pursuing more study in the field of ethics. And it is interesting when philosophers talk about things, sometimes you do have to entertain counterintuitive or, quite frankly, revolting things. And it's not necessarily incorrect just because it causes a revulsion at first. But I do think it's important that when we are confronted with something that's horrid, that's morally repugnant, we do have to walk a fine line between being casually dismissive, like it's not a big deal to talk about that, or the other extreme would be becoming hysterical. We should not become hysterical or emotional. It's okay to have emotions and let them guide us, but we should be controlling them. They shouldn't be controlling us. Because if we become hysterical at a repugnant view, then sometimes we seem less secure, irrational, and the Bible talks about this as well. It says, do answer a fool according to his folly, lest he become wise in his own eyes. But then the next verse says, don't answer a fool, lest you appear to be a fool in the eyes of others. So it's sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't when dealing with rather absurd opinions. And so you have to walk a fine line, really, about how we should engage them. And I think it's fine to we should rationally engage, point out inconsistencies or problems, and for me, I would hope people would see, some repugnant views that when you tease the pro-choice position out to its logical conclusion, you really do get infanticide. I remember reading Peter Singer, the famous Princeton bioethicist, and what he said is he said pro-lifers are right, that there's no morally relevant difference between a baby after birth and before birth. He says where pro-lifers are wrong, however, is they think because of that you should treat a fetus like an infant. And Singer says rather we should just treat the infant like a fetus. You see what that means?
Yes,
yeah.
That is a little bit bracing.
So we have to address it, and then sometimes, and I appreciate philosopher Robert George, one of the new natural law proponents. He sometimes, when he was confronted with infanticide in a symposium, I think it was from First Things, he just said, no, I'm just going to say it's wrong and it's just obvious. And sometimes, you have to just call things out, but where arguments are needed, they should be marshaled. But it is always a fine line between being dismissive and being hysterical.